Hello everyone, welcome to another episode with the Silver Sabres Combat Academy, and we are here today to talk about cuts and the different origins for the arcs of the cut that you can deliver. So we're going to try and keep it quick. Alright, so when we see this kind of stuff here where the rotation is taking place essentially as the center of the rotation is Lao Kung, is in the palm, is coming entirely from the wrist. So anybody who's cutting like this, we refer to these as empty cuts. And the reason we refer to them as empty cuts is because realistically the action of doing this with your wrist uses this much muscle. What is that, the size of a medium rodent? There's not a lot of power in it. Even if this was razor sharp, you wouldn't be doing conclusive damage, and it's of limited value. So it's fine if you're using point work for the thrust, because all of these tiny movements that you're going to deliver from the wrist, they're very important in defending against thrusts and also for preparing for your own delivery as well. But in terms of cutting, you're not going to do a lot of damage. Even with a nice decent machete, which is weighted towards the point of the blade, it's not particularly effective. So empty cuts taking place in the wrist. Where's the origin? The origin is the wrist. This is where the action is coming from. And again, it's fine from a competition perspective, a sports perspective. You can score points this way because the referee will see contact and there's no consideration of whether the contact had any real meaning or not. What we then progress to is the short arm cut. Now the short arm cut is using the origin of the elbow. Now it's also going to incorporate the empty cut as well. So you have this plus this, and these two components coming together, you're now using the tricep as well as the forearm muscles. And what are we talking about? A small cat worth of muscle, right? It's going to be more significant. You will be able to cut through to the bone using something like this, but again, it's not as good as a long arm cut, because the long arm cut now uses the muscles of the torso to create a flexion at the shoulder, and you're using the tricep to create an extension at the elbow, plus you're using the forearm to create adduction at the wrist, and the three of these together are going to produce significant damage. And at this point you are, you're doing damage that is going to be conclusive and isn't going to just be shrugged off. However, if you find yourself frequently having to face targets who are considerably larger than yourself, even your long arm cut is not going to be enough. So then we progress to the next joint in the kinetic chain that will allow us to increase the arc of that cut. And for that, we're going to use the center of the body, just like has been taught for thousands of years. This is the engine that drives the movements all the way out to the fingertips. So we now have the empty cut, the short arm cut, the long arm cut, and you can see that is now what's 270 degrees. But if I turn to face the front here, so I've got the cable stuck on my Yoda ears, so I'm now going to deliver this as a diagonal descending cut. Right, I'm cutting through the target all the way down towards the floor, and here's the empty cut component. Here's the short arm component. Here's the long arm component, and the long arm component takes this all the way through. Now I add the waist. So here's the wheeled, there's the waist as well. Right, so I now have that empty, short, long waist, and that is producing a cut which is taking me, oh look, there's the wheeled, there's the cut. All right, so what we have is a huge arc, and it's now employing how much of the body, right? So the empty cut uses the forearm. The short arm cut uses the tricep as well. The long arm cut is using the rotator cuffs and the pectoral muscles as well as latissimus dorsi, and depends on the angle of the cut, the muscle group's going to change. But as soon as you start introducing the waist as well, you're using the meat of the adductors, you're using the obliques, you're using, what, 3/4 of the body now. So what does that leave? What's left? Well, we also have travel. We also have travel. And this is a linear action. So if I turn and I advance with my left foot, I'm going to sit back into the right foot here. Here's the wheeled into the pre-cut. From here, as I make the transition from the right foot into the ball of the left foot, there's my travel, plus the waist, plus the long arm, plus the short and the empty, cut. And I refer to a cut which, a rising cut, number 5 coming up, exactly the same business. And you can see I'm using 2 hands on the saber as well now. So even the empty cut, which we just poo-pooed and said it was rubbish, is actually not so bad when you start to include the waist, because I've got 2 hands on the weapon. So I'm not just cutting using this tiny forearm muscle doing this. I'm using the whole of the back arm as well. So that's triceps and all the muscles on the back around the scapula that are helping to retract that elbow back, and that is coming here, here, here. That is what I will refer to traveling, rotating, extending all together, a holistic cut, because it uses the whole body. It feels good. It helps you to understand the connection through the whole body. Now, you don't always want to use a holistic cut. They are not appropriate for everything. You might start a cut this big and at the last moment turn to deliver something else from a completely different origin. What did we do there? We started a holistic cut, recognized that it's being defended before we've arrived, and switching to deliver something else entirely. And it's only by having an understanding of the options available to you that you're going to be able to, as the context changes, as the moment evolves, as the strategy needs to adapt. If you don't understand the options, you're just going to be stuck, you know, like an old record on repeat, just doing the same thing and not understanding why it's not working. So, you know, when we do any of these techniques, try and appreciate what the opportunities are in each. Some things lend themselves to different cuts. I hate, for example, trying to do empty rising cuts. They don't work. You need to use long arm cuts from underneath, whereas delivering to the face, delivering to the cranium, a short, sharp, empty cut, that's, even if it doesn't kill, it's going to give you the chance to follow up with something, because it's disorientating. Make the first few incisions quickly using smaller arcs, and then whilst they're trying to get their mind back, that's when you would deliver something that would actually finish it entirely. and yeah, even if we're talking semi-contact with medium grade blades, right? The same technology is applied in reverse as well to give you the ability to control the hits. Now, if you can't deliver with precision, you can't protect your opponent. So when we talk about opponents, we mean partners. They're your friends, even though you're sparring for, you know, a trophy or whatever. You still have a duty of care to your opponent, and you need to look after them. And if you don't understand what you're doing, where the power is being generated from, where the geometry is rotating, it's tough. It's tough. You don't have to look at it mathematically, but you do need to be able to demonstrate this stuff experientially, and it makes life much easier to explain the more advanced techniques that come later in the syllabus. In particular, when we talk about retarding the arcs of the cut to protect somebody in a display fight, that's an essential skill. And also, as we start to talk about, if you want to understand binding, you need to have a very clear understanding of where you're executing the movement from, because if it's done incorrectly, you can quite easily bind a weapon into an even more advantageous position over you. So you know, for a nice large bind versus a little bind here, they're completely different things, and working against different types of attacks. So be clear, get it right. Even if all you're doing is practicing your spins, you should tell yourself, these are empty cuts, empty cuts, empty cuts. And then as soon as you start bringing that into an actual level 1 cutting method, and you can see once we've got this blended, that is actually at least a short arm cut. This is at least a short arm cut, and if we take it even higher, they become long. If we add the waist, we're really starting to move. And now we're going to add the travel in as well. Yeah. Holistic cuts are your friends. They look awesome. Take care. See you soon.